For centuries, stories have been written by victors, embellished with exaggerations, or buried under the dust of oblivion. But there are stories that endure, that refuse to die. Stories that don't scream, but whisper loudly in every symbol, every gesture, every braid drawn on the nape of a warrior's neck. This journey is not a simple historical reconstruction. It is a deep dive into the layers of meaning that sustain a culture. Here, every word seeks to restore the forgotten, illuminate the distorted, and offer you not just facts, but soul. So take a deep breath, sharpen your ears, and prepare to enter a world where aesthetics were not vanity, but ritual, where appearance was not superficial but destiny. Before starting this video, remember to subscribe and like. For a long time, it was thought that the soul of ancient cultures was hidden in temples, codices, and sacred rituals. But there are places where the spirit of a people is not written in stone, but in the way they viewed the world. In this first chapter, we delve into a tradition that used not swords or longships to conquer, but silence, lines, and mystery, the art of tattooing as a sacred language. Just as Vikings carved symbols into their skin to show strength or spiritual connection, there are cultures that understood the body as a living parchment, an altar of invisible signs that speak without opening their mouths. On the fringes of the Pacific, Polynesian peoples tattooed spirals and lines on the skin of young people upon reaching maturity, not as a fashion, but by divine mandate. Each figure had a name, a story, a function. It wasn't decoration, it was embodied memory. Like a Bible without paper. The ancient Maya tattooed gods, jaguars, and serpents on their warriors, believing that the pain of the sacred sting brought them closer to heaven. A tattooed warrior wasn't just a strong man. He was a map of sacrifices, promises, and invisible pacts. His skin recounted battles that no chronicler had written down, but that everyone could read. And whoever bore those marks knew that dying without them was like dying without a face. North African peoples, such as the Berbers, marked women's cheeks with geometric symbols. It wasn't aesthetics or ornamentation. It was lineage. It was earth. It was prayer. Some marks protected from evil, others signaled fertility or mourning. But all shared a hidden language, as if the gods spoke in dots, triangles, and crossed lines. And although today many of those traditions have been relegated by the superficial shine of modern tattooing, something survives. Because there are still hands that tattoo not just ink, but history. There are still skins that are covered in symbols not to look different, but to remind themselves of who they are. Like the Viking warriors who perfumed themselves to die with dignity, these cultures teach us that the body is more than flesh. It is testimony, it is a temple, it is an archive. Thus ends this first chapter of the journey, but the question is just beginning. What does your skin say when no one listens? Do you carry marks that speak for you, even when the world is silent? The story continues. Because as long as there are symbols, there will be memory. And as long as there is memory, there will be eternity. While marks on the skin spoke of belonging and memory, another practice revealed the intimacy of a culture, the act of covering oneself. In many civilizations, clothing was not only a protection from the elements, but also a manifestation of identity, status, and worldview. In this second chapter, we follow the trail of textiles that not only encased the body, but also history. Desert peoples wove long robes that danced in the wind, made to survive the relentless heat but also to preserve decorum. Each fold had a motif, each color a message. Among the Bedouins, the quality of the embroidery demonstrated not only textile skill, but also rank and ancestral wisdom. Dressing was a ritual. Putting on a garment meant entering into dialogue with one's ancestors. Andean peoples wove stories in the form of ponchos. Threads of llama, alpaca, or vicuña were intertwined like threads of shared destinies. The colors were not chosen at random. Red for the blood of the earth, yellow for the sun that illuminates it, black for the mystery of the hills. A single poncho could recount generations of myths. And like tattoos, these garments were not just used for clothing, but also for reading. But there was something beyond the visual. In the third chapter, we delve into the silent gestures that accompanied the body. Perfume, bathing, oil. In many cultures, the act of perfuming oneself was a preparation for transcendence. Among the Egyptians, each fragrance was a key that opened invisible doors. They used sacred oils before ceremonies because they knew that scent could also uplift the spirit. In Japan, the art of bathing became a philosophy. The onsen was not just a thermal space, but a school of presence. Immersion was like returning to one's origins. The hot water washed not only the body, but also the worries that inhabited it. And before dying, many samurai bathed delicately, perfumed themselves, and combed their hair. Because facing death with dignity required more than courage, it required care. Grooming wasn't superficial. It was preparation. It was respect. Like Vikings combing their hair before battle, or warriors wearing their finest clothes for the final stand. These cultures teach us that aesthetics aren't banal. They're a sacred language. And the body, when cared for with purpose, becomes a silent testimony to who we are and what we are willing to defend. Because in the end, every perfume has a memory, every fabric carries a destiny. And while the marks on the skin speak to the gods, the scent, the texture, the gesture, speak to the living. We continue the journey. Because there is still much to remember. When the body becomes a symbol and everyday gestures become ritual, there is one element that traverses cultures, eras, and geographies like an invisible thread: hair. In this fourth chapter, we examine this silent art that accompanies the face, threads time, and communicates without words. It is not just aesthetic, it is a legacy. From the Amazonian tribes who cut their hair according to lunar cycles to the desert women who hid braids under embroidered veils, hair has always been more than a fiber. It has been an offering, a promise, a banner. Among the Maasai people, for example, hairstyles marked the transition from boy to warrior. A shaved head wasn't neglect, it was renewal. When they returned from battle, long strands woven with ochre were a symbol of victory. No mirror defined beauty, but rather the dust, sweat, and silence of one who prepared to protect. In ancient India, ascetics let their hair grow as a sign of detachment, not out of carelessness, but because each strand represented a renunciation of the world. Untidy hair was a sign of freedom, as if the wind carried their thoughts, their desires, their history. And just as hair spoke of what had been lived, it also spoke of what had been hoped for. In some Central Asian cultures, women braided small amulets into their hair on their wedding day. It wasn't an ornament, it was protection. Because hair wasn't cut lightly. Some people kept locks of hair from deceased relatives as a talisman of eternal presence. Hair was an emotional archive. Not just a frame for the face, but an intimate witness to life. But if the body is a temple and every part has meaning, there is a stage that elevates everything: death. The fifth chapter takes us to that threshold where ritual ceases to be a metaphor and becomes destiny. In many cultures, the act of preparing the body for departure was neither a medical matter nor a practical procedure. It was a ceremony. In Madagascar, for example, the Famada Hana, the ritual of the return of the ancestors, involved carefully wrapping the bodies in new fabrics, perfuming them, and even dancing with them. It wasn't macabre. It was intimate. It was a reunion. In Egypt, embalming wasn't a technique, it was a prayer. Each organ was removed with sacred words. Each bandage was placed as if weaving the path to the afterlife. It wasn't about preserving a body, but preparing for a journey. The face had to retain its beauty, because before the gods, dignity had to be intact. Dying wasn't disappearing, it was presenting itself. And even today, there are people who understand that the way one dies speaks to the way one lived. The Navajo bathed in sacred herbs before surrendering their souls. The Tibetans left their bodies to be offered up to the heavens to be dispersed by the elements. Nothing was accidental. Everything was a transition. Because if we live leaving marks on our skin, dressing ourselves with memory, perfuming ourselves with purpose, and styling our hair with legacy, then the final act cannot be indifferent. In death, as in life, the body continues to speak. And those who understand this transform each day into preparation. Not for the end, but for reunion. So we close this journey. Not with a conclusion, but with an invitation. May every gesture you make have meaning. May every detail of your appearance be another word in your story. Because in the end, if the body speaks, may what it says be worth hearing. And so, after crossing the corridors of time, what remains are not just images, but impressions. The echoes of a people who understood that every act, every ornament, Every line carved into the flesh had a purpose: to endure. Because living with purpose is not just about conquering territories, but leaving marks that defy oblivion. Today, as I close this story, you may not have a sword or a family saga written in runes, but you carry with you the same question they faced before the ritual mirror at dawn: am I ready to be remembered? And if that answer hasn't yet formed, keep walking. Let your body speak for you. Let your story be written not with ink, but with presence. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you in the next video.